The Beverly Hillbillies turned a poor mountain family into one of the funniest success stories on television. Oil money, a mansion in Beverly Hills, and a world they never quite fit into. But after the Clampetts left the screen, real life told a very different story. Fame changed some, time took others, and their journeys still surprise fans today. Here's what really happened to the cast of the Beverly Hillbillies. Jed Clampett was the plain-spoken mountain man who suddenly became a Beverly Hills millionaire, and somehow stayed the same decent country father underneath it all. Calm, honest, and never dazzled by money, Jed made the rich folks around him look a lot sillier than the Clampetts ever did. Buddy Ebsen brought that easy country warmth to the role at 54. Before becoming Jed, Ebsen had already lived a long Hollywood life, dancing, acting in films, and even nearly playing the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz before illness forced him out. After the Beverly Hillbillies, he found a second major TV chapter with Barnaby Jones, proving his career had much more range than one country sitcom role. Buddy Ebsen passed away in 2003 at the age of 95 after respiratory failure, leaving behind Jed Clampett as one of TV's kindest country fathers, a man whose plain common sense could make all of Beverly Hills look foolish. Daisy Moses was Granny, the tiny mountain firecracker who treated Beverly Hills like it was the strangest place on earth. She cooked, fussed, yelled, mixed up backwoods cures, and ran the Clampett mansion with more force than people twice her size. Irene Ryan gave Granny that sharp country bite at 59. Before, Ryan had already spent years in vaudeville, radio, film, and television, building the kind of comic timing that made every scowl and shout land perfectly. After the Beverly Hillbillies, she surprised audiences on Broadway in Pippin, earning major praise and a Tony nomination for her stage work. Irene Ryan died in 1973 at the age of 70 after glioblastoma and arteriosclerotic heart disease, following a stroke during a Pippin performance. What remains is Granny's wild mountain energy. Sharp, stubborn, hilarious, and still impossible to replace. Milburn Drysdale was the greedy Beverly Hills banker who treated the Clampett fortune like it was his own personal oxygen supply. Nervous, flattering, and always terrified the family might take their millions somewhere else, Drysdale turned money panic into comedy. Raymond Bailey gave him that perfect mix of polish and desperation at 58. By the time Bailey became Drysdale, he already had years of film, stage, and television work behind him, often playing lawyers, bankers, doctors, and men in suits. After the Beverly Hillbillies, health problems slowed his career, and he eventually stepped away from acting after suffering from Alzheimer's disease. He passed away in 1980 at the age of 75 after a heart attack. He left behind Milburn Drysdale as one of TV's funniest portraits of rich man anxiety, a banker so obsessed with keeping the Clampetts happy that he often looked crazier than the hillbillies he was trying to manage. Jane Hathaway was Drysdale's loyal, brainy secretary. Stiff, efficient, secretly sweet, and usually the smartest person in the bank. She could handle files, crises, and Drysdale's schemes with a straight face, while her awkward crushes and nervous energy gave the show a different kind of comedy. Nancy Kulp brought that sharp, oddball charm to the role at 41. Kulp's life was never limited to sitcom work. She had served in the U.S. Naval Reserve, studied journalism, and later built a long acting career full of precise, unusual characters. After the Beverly Hillbillies, she kept appearing on television, taught acting, and even ran for Congress in Pennsylvania, which gave her story a surprising real-world turn. Nancy Kulp died in 1991 at the age of 69 after cancer. What remains is Miss Hathaway's wonderfully strange mix of intelligence, loyalty, and social awkwardness, the kind of character who could be proper one second and completely flustered the next. Mrs. Margaret Drysdale was the snobbish Beverly Hills wife who looked at the Clampetts like they were a personal attack on good taste. Proper, dramatic, and forever horrified by their country ways, she turned social embarrassment into a running battle. Harriet E. MacGibbon gave Mrs. Drysdale that icy, upper-class panic at 56. MacGibbon had an elegant screen presence that fit perfectly with society women, wealthy neighbors, and anyone who looked like they owned expensive curtains. Her acting career included stage, film, and television work, but Mrs. Drysdale became the role that made her face unforgettable to classic sitcom fans. Harriet E. MacGibbon passed away in 1987 at the age of 81, with no widely reported cause of death. She left behind Mrs. Drysdale as the perfect Beverly Hills foil, a woman so offended by the Clampett's manners that she made their simple country honesty look even funnier. Cousin Pearl Bodine was Jethro's proud, talkative mother and one of the first country voices around the Clampett family. She was bossy, musical, romantic, and always seemed ready to turn a simple visit into a family production. B. Benaderet gave Pearl that big, warm, old radio comedy energy at 56. Benaderet had already built a huge career before Pearl, especially through radio and voice work. She was the original voice behind classic animated characters like Betty Rubble, and after her time with the Clampetts, she became the lead of Petticoat Junction, giving her another major place in rural TV comedy. Bear Benaderet passed away in 1968 at the age of 62 after lung cancer. Her legacy lives in that unmistakable comic voice. Warm, sharp, musical, and full of country personality. Pearl may not have stayed for the whole run, but she helped shape the family's earliest flavor. Shorty Kellums was Jed's old mountain friend, bringing in a rougher, more backwoods kind of comedy whenever he appeared. He felt like someone who had known the Clampetts before the mansion, before the money, and before Beverly Hills started acting confused by them. Shug Fisher brought that homespun looseness to Shorty at 55. Fisher's career came from music, comedy, and Western entertainment, not just sitcom acting. He had been part of the Sons of the Pioneers, worked in country and Western films, and carried the kind of real hillbilly showman background that made Shorty feel less like a costume and more like a lived-in character. Shug Fisher passed away in 1984 at the age of 76 after a long illness. Audiences still remember Shorty as a reminder of the Clampett's mountain roots. Scruffy, funny, stubborn, and completely out of step with Beverly Hills polish in the best possible way. Janet Trago was one of the beautiful young women who added glamour to the Beverly Hills side of the show. Stylish, sweet, and very much part of that polished California world, she stood in sharp contrast to the Clampett's country manners. Sharon Tate brought that fresh screen beauty to Janet at just 19. Tate's career was still rising when she appeared on television. She later moved into films like Valley of the Dolls, The Fearless Vampire Killers, and The Wrecking Crew, where Hollywood seemed ready to turn her into a much bigger star. Her story, sadly, became remembered for something far darker than her early promise. Sharon Tate passed away in 1969 at the age of 26 after she was murdered by members of the Manson family. What remains is not only the tragedy, but also the image of a young actress whose life and career were cut short before the world could see how far she might have gone. Ellie Mae Clampett was the sweet, animal-loving country girl who could charm a room 1 second and out-wrestle a man the next. She was pretty, innocent, and stronger than most folks in Beverly Hills knew what to do with. Donna Douglas brought that wide-eyed mountain girl charm to Ellie Mae at 30, making her feel like sunshine with a slingshot hidden behind it. Douglas became closely tied to Ellie Mae for the rest of her life, but she did not try to run away from it. After the show, she appeared in films, did gospel singing, wrote children's books, and often embraced the fans who still saw her as the Clampett girl with the critters. That connection stayed warm, not bitter. Donna Douglas died in 2015 at the age of 82 after pancreatic cancer. She left behind Ellie Mae as one of TV's most lovable country daughters, gentle with animals, tough when needed, and still remembered as the heart of the Clampett kids. Jethrine Bodine was Jethro's twin sister, and the joke was wonderfully odd from the start. A big, awkward country girl played through a mix of Linda Henning's bodywork and Max Baer Jr.'s voice. She was shy, sweet, and strange, in that broad 60s sitcom way, the kind of character who could only really belong in the Clampett's ridiculous family tree. Linda Henning was 18 when she helped bring Jethrine to life. Henning already had rural sitcom comedy in her blood. She later became much better known as Betty Jo Bradley on Petticoat Junction, where she had a warmer, more central role and grew into a familiar face for fans of that whole countryside TV universe. Her career stayed closely connected to that gentle, small-town CBS comedy style. Now 82, Linda Henning remains one of the living links to that old rural sitcom era. Jethrine was a goofy side character, sure, but she added to the show's anything-goes family humor, the kind of joke that feels bizarre now, but was pure front porch TV silliness back then. John Brewster was the oil company man who helped connect the Clampett's mountain fortune to the fancy world waiting for them in California. He was polished, businesslike, and much calmer than the madness that usually followed the family around. Frank Wilcox gave Brewster that straight-faced old Hollywood authority at 55, which made the Clampett's confusion around wealth even funnier. Wilcox had already spent decades playing executives, lawyers, doctors, military men, and all sorts of respectable types before he entered the Clampett story. He was one of those classic studio-era faces who could walk into a scene and instantly look like he owned the office, signed the papers, and knew exactly where the money was. He passed away in 1974 at the age of 66 after a heart attack. His legacy here is quieter than the main family's, but John Brewster helped start the whole fish-out-of-water dream. Poor mountain folks suddenly rich enough to make every banker in Beverly Hills nervous. Elverna Bradshaw was one of those sharp-tongued country women who could walk into the Clampett's world and make things louder before she even sat down. She brought that nosy, neighborly, slightly combative mountain flavor, the kind of woman who knew everyone's business and had no problem adding her opinion. Elvia Allman gave Elverna that busybody bite at 58. Allman had already been making people laugh for years before this role. Her voice and timing showed up all over classic radio, film, and television, including I Love Lucy and the Jack Benny program. She had that perfect old comedy rhythm where one sharp line could make a whole scene feel more alive. Elvia Allman passed away in 1992 at the age of 87 after pneumonia. She left behind Elverna as one of those wonderfully fussy side characters who made the Clampett's country world feel crowded, noisy, and full of people who always had something to say. Mark Templeton was the handsome young man who brought a little romantic sparkle into Ellie Mae's Beverly Hills story. He looked polished enough for California, but still simple enough to fit into one of those sweet, old-fashioned sitcom crushes. Roger Torrey played him at 21, giving Mark that clean-cut early 60s leading man look. Torrey had the kind of face television liked to use for cowboys, athletes, soldiers, and charming young men. His career moved through westerns, dramas, and guest roles, but he never became the giant star some viewers might expect when they see him beside Ellie Mae. Sometimes old TV is full of faces that seemed one big role away from breaking through. Roger Torrey passed away in 1998 at the age of 57 after a heart attack. Mark Templeton remains a small but memorable piece of Ellie Mae's world, a reminder that even in all the oil money madness, the show still found room for innocent, porch-light romance. Dash Riprock was the over-the-top Hollywood heartthrob who looked like he had been invented by a studio publicity department and then polished twice. Handsome, fake smooth, and gloriously ridiculous, he gave the show a perfect parody of movie star glamour. Larry Pennell brought that big leading man grin to Dash at 34. Pennell had the build and presence of a classic screen hero, and he used that beautifully here by playing the joke straight. Away from Dash, he appeared in westerns, adventure shows, and sports-related roles, but his sitcom fame came from letting Hollywood vanity look just silly enough beside the Clampetts. Larry Pennell passed away in 2013 at the age of 85, with no widely reported cause of death. Dash Riprock left behind pure 60s TV satire, the kind of handsome movie star who made Ellie Mae blush and made Beverly Hills look even more fake than usual. Sam Drucker was the friendly general store man who felt like he belonged to every small town on CBS. He was calm, practical, and always seemed ready to sell you flour, hear your gossip, or explain something with that dry country patience. Frank Cady brought Sam's gentle store counter charm to the role at 47. Cady's magic was that Sam Drucker did not live in only one show. He carried the same character through Petticoat Junction, Green Acres, and the Beverly Hillbillies, making him feel like the clerk of a whole shared rural TV universe. He was not flashy, but that was exactly why he worked. Frank Cady passed away in 2012 at the age of 96 from natural causes. Sam Drucker left behind the feeling of an old country store where everybody knew your name, your business, and probably what you were buying before you asked. Sonny Drysdale was Milburn Drysdale's spoiled, ridiculous son, rich, useless, and exactly the kind of Beverly Hills boy the Clampetts made look even sillier. He had money, manners, and no real clue how ordinary people worked. Louis Nye played Sonny with that perfect smug comic foolishness at 49. Nye had already made his name in comedy before Sonny, especially through The Steve Allen Show, where his slick, hi-ho Steve-erino style became part of early TV comedy. His career kept moving through guest roles, voice work, and sitcom appearances, always leaning into that sharp, silly, slightly self-important energy. Louis Nye passed away in 2005 at the age of 92 after lung cancer. Sonny Drysdale remains a neat little Beverly Hills joke, a rich man's son with polish on the outside and absolutely no country sense underneath. Homer Cratchit was one of those stiff, pinched, official-looking men who seemed born to make simple things more complicated. With his dry face and fussy manner, he fit perfectly into the world of bankers, clerks, and city types who never quite knew what to do with the Clampetts. Charles Lane brought that razor-dry authority to Homer at 57. Lane was already a legend of that guy, acting long before this role. His career stretched across hundreds of films and TV episodes, from It's a Wonderful Life to I Love Lucy, and countless cranky clerks, judges, and businessmen. Nobody looked more annoyed by nonsense than Charles Lane. Charles Lane passed away in 2007, at the age of 102, from natural causes. His legacy lives in a century of sharp little screen moments, and Homer Cratchit is one more reminder that nobody played irritated authority quite like him. Cousin Roy was the musical country cousin who brought real showbiz twang into the Clampett world. He did not feel like some Hollywood idea of a country performer. He had the grin, the guitar, and the easy stage confidence of someone who truly belonged around front porch music and family fooling. Roy Clark brought that natural country charm to Cousin Roy at 29. Clark's life after this role became much bigger in the world of music and television. He turned into a country entertainment legend through Hee Haw, hit records, guitar work, comedy, and live performances. He was the kind of performer who could pick fast, joke faster, and make an audience feel like they were sitting right there with him. Roy Clark passed away in 2018 at the age of 85, after complications from pneumonia. Cousin Roy is only a small piece of his story, but it catches him before Hee Haw made him a household name, already warm, musical, and completely at home in country comedy. Daphne Dempsey was one of those Beverly Hills women who brought glamour, nerves, and a little comic confusion into the Clampetts' orbit. She belonged to the fancy side of the show, where polished city people kept running into country logic and somehow lost the argument. Gene Carson gave Daphne that lively, slightly dramatic spark at 39. Carson had the kind of face and voice that fit classic TV perfectly. She appeared in shows like The Andy Griffith Show, where fans remember her as Fun Girl Daphne, along with The Twilight Zone, Perry Mason, and plenty of guest roles that made use of her comic timing and bright personality. Jean Carson passed away in 2005 at the age of 82 after complications from a stroke. Daphne Dempsey left behind that fun old TV glamour. Stylish, expressive, and just offbeat enough to look right at home when Beverly Hills started acting stranger than the Hillbillies. Gloria Mundy was one of the polished young women who crossed paths with the Clampetts, bringing that neat, pretty, well-mannered 60s sitcom energy into the mansion. She felt like someone from the respectable side of television suddenly dropped into a world where possums, oil money, and mountain manners made perfect sense. Eleanor Donahue brought that clean-cut charm to Gloria at 25. Donahue was already familiar to American viewers long before this appearance, thanks to Father Knows Best, where she became one of TV's classic daughters. Her career kept going through The Andy Griffith Show, The Odd Couple, and many later guest roles, giving her a long life across several generations of family television. Now 89, Eleanor Donahue remains tied to that warm, early TV innocence. Gloria Mundy may be a smaller role, but seeing her here feels like watching one classic sitcom world bump gently into another. Lowell Redlings Farquhar was one of those grand, old money types who made Beverly Hills feel extra fancy before the Clampetts accidentally made it ridiculous. Proper, polished, and carrying that upper-crust comic stiffness, he belonged to the world of manners, titles, and people who probably worried about which fork to use. Charles Ruggles brought that old-school elegance and dry confusion to Lowell at 76. Ruggles had been a familiar face for decades before this role, with a career that stretched back through classic Hollywood, Broadway, radio, and early television. He was known for playing charming, fussy, slightly bewildered men, the kind who could make being proper look funny without trying too hard. By the time he entered the Clampett universe, he already felt like a piece of show business history walking into the room. Charles Ruggles died in 1970 at the age of 89 after cancer. Lowell Redlings Farquhar remains a small but very fitting part of his long comic legacy, a polished gentleman dropped into a sitcom world where country common sense kept poking holes in rich people ceremony. Professor Robert Graham was the nervous, gentle academic type who brought a softer, brainier kind of comedy into the Clampetts' Beverly Hills world. He felt like someone who trusted books, manners, and careful explanations, which made him wonderfully outmatched whenever mountain logic entered the conversation. John Fiedler gave Professor Graham that delicate, fluttery charm at 37. Fiedler's career was full of voices and faces that people knew instantly, even when they did not always remember his name. He appeared in films, sitcoms, and stage work, but his voice became especially beloved as Piglet in Winnie the Pooh. That soft, anxious sweetness was his gift, and it fit perfectly with characters who seemed one loud noise away from falling apart. John Fiedler passed away in 2005 at the age of 80 after cancer. Professor Robert Graham is only one stop in a long career, but it carries that same Fiedler quality: shy, precise, funny, and oddly lovable. He left behind a screen and voice legacy built on nervous little souls that audiences wanted to protect. Gladys Flatt was the glamorous, eye-catching kind of character who made the Clampetts' world bump right into Hollywood sparkle. Beautiful, bright, and very much part of that 60s TV idea of showbiz glamour, she stood out the moment she appeared. Joy Lansing brought Gladys that blonde bombshell shine at 33, giving the country comedy another taste of California fantasy. Lansing had already built a career around beauty, music, and screen presence, appearing in films, television, nightclub work, and variety-style performances. She was the kind of performer old Hollywood loved to photograph, but she also had comic timing and a warm presence that kept her from feeling like just decoration. Her career had plenty of glamour, but it was also cut painfully short. Joy Lansing passed away in 1972 at the age of 43 after breast cancer. Gladys Flatt remains a small piece of her TV story, but her larger legacy is that image of 60s Hollywood beauty with real warmth behind it. A performer remembered not just for how she looked, but for the sparkle she brought into every room. Myrna Carter was one of those polished Beverly Hills women who looked like she belonged around expensive houses, neat clothes, and people pretending everything was more sophisticated than it really was. She brought that clean, stylish 60s sitcom glamour into the Clampett's orbit, where even the most proper city character could end up looking confused by country common sense. Mary Anders gave Myrna that bright, camera-ready charm at 27. Anders had already made her way through the classic television world before this role, appearing in westerns, crime shows, comedies, and low-budget films where her beauty and confident screen presence were easy to use. She never became the single-name star some actresses of that era hoped to be, but she worked steadily, which in old Hollywood was its own kind of survival. Mary Anders passed away in 2012 at the age of 68, with no widely reported cause of death. Myrna Carter is a smaller stop in her career, but she still carries that old TV sparkle, the kind of guest appearance that made Beverly Hills feel glamorous, busy, and just fancy enough for the Clampetts to accidentally turn upside down. Jethro Bodine was the big, eager, not-so-bright cousin who could dream himself into a new career almost every week. One day he wanted to be a spy, the next a movie star, a brain surgeon, or some other grand idea he barely understood. Baer Jr. brought Jethro's huge grin, country confidence, and lovable foolishness to the role at 24. After the series, Baer struggled with the kind of typecasting that follows a character this famous. Instead of disappearing, he moved behind the camera, producing and directing films, most notably Macon County Line. He also spent years trying to build business projects connected to the Beverly Hillbillies name, showing he understood the strange, lasting power of Jethro and the Clampett brand. Now 89, Baer Jr. remains the last surviving main Clampett cast member. Jethro's legacy is pure rural sitcom silliness, big dreams, tiny common sense, and a kind of cheerful confidence that made him impossible to dislike, even when he had no idea what he was talking about. The Clampetts may have left Beverly Hills behind, but their humor, charm, and unforgettable moments still live on. Thank you for watching. Share which cast member surprised you most, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more classic TV stories.